alarm blared, an insistent wail pulling me from a fitful sleep. I groaned, slapping at the snooze button, but the sharp noise had already done its job. With bleary eyes, I glanced at the time, 6:30 a.m., another early start for another tedious day. Sighing, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and shuffled to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face in an attempt to jolt myself awake. Downstairs, the house was eerily quiet. My roommate, Sam, had already left for work, leaving me alone to face the morning. I padded to the kitchen, feeling a gnawing hunger that demanded attention. Breakfast was a necessity, but as I opened the fridge, I realized with a pang of annoyance that we were out of milk. Cereal without milk? No, thank you. I rummaged through the pantry, finding a lone box of pancake mix shoved in the back. It had been there forever, the edges of the box frayed and discolored. I pulled it out, shrugging to myself. Pancakes it was then. The mix seemed fine, and the expiration date was still a few months away. I stirred it with water, a monotonous whirl of white batter, and poured the first scoop onto the sizzling pan. The familiar aroma of cooking pancakes filled the kitchen, soothing in its normalcy. I flipped them with ease, stacking the golden brown circles on a plate. With a drizzle of syrup and a pat of butter, they looked perfect. I sat at the table, ready to dig in, but just as I lifted the fork to my mouth, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Startled, I glanced around, but the room was empty. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my still waking mind, and took a bite. The pancakes were delicious, a sweet comfort that I hadn't realized I missed. I chewed slowly, savoring the taste, but there it was again. A whisper, barely audible but definitely there. Who's there? I called out, my voice sounding small and uncertain in the empty house. Silence answered me, pressing in around the corners of the room. I stood up, my appetite evaporating, and took a cautious step toward the hallway. As I did, a chill ran down my spine, and the whispering grew louder, more distinct. Help us. I froze, heart pounding. The voice was real, but it seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I spun around, searching for the source, and my eyes landed on the pancake mix box. It sat innocuously on the counter, but there was something deeply unsettling about it now. I approached it warily, lifting it with trembling hands. As I did, the whispers intensified, a chorus of disembodied voices pleading for help. With mounting dread, I tore open the box, emptying its contents onto the counter. A fine, powdery cloud billowed up, and as it settled, I saw something glinting in the mix. My breath hitched as I reached down, sifting through the floury substance until my fingers closed around a small, cold object. A locket, covered in pancake mix, but undeniably a locket. I wiped it clean with shaking hands, revealing an intricately engraved heart-shaped pendant. I pried it open, revealing a tiny photograph inside. It was a faded image of a young girl, her eyes wide with fear. "What the hell?" I whispered, feeling a wave of nausea. The whispers around me grew frantic, overlapping in a cacophony of desperation. My head throbbed, and I clutched the locket tightly, unsure of what to do. "Find us." The voice was clearer now, almost as if the girl in the photograph was speaking directly to me. "Free us." Panic surged through me. I dropped the locket and stumbled back, nearly knocking over the chair. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the bizarre and terrifying situation. The logical part of me screamed that this was impossible, a hallucination brought on by stress or lack of sleep. But the whispers were real, tangible, and they filled the room with a sense of palpable dread. I had to get out. I turned and ran for the door, but as I reached the hallway, I felt a force pulling me back. It was as if the air had thickened, resisting my every movement. I struggled, gasping for breath, and then the voices crescendoed into a deafening roar. "Find us! Free us!" With a final desperate lunge, I broke free and burst out of the house, stumbling onto the front lawn. The morning sun was blinding, and the normalcy of the outside world clashed violently with the horror I'd just experienced. I stood there, panting, trying to gather my thoughts. What was happening? Was I losing my mind? I glanced back at the house, now silent and unassuming. The locket. I had to do something about the locket. Ignoring the trembling in my hands, I marched back inside, determined to get rid of the cursed object. I found it where I dropped it, still open to the girl's haunting eyes. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and headed to the backyard, where I began to dig a hole with the fervor of someone desperate to rid themselves of a terrible burden. As I buried the locket, the whispers faded, and an eerie calm settled over the yard. I smoothed the dirt over the hole, praying that this would be the end of it. For days afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking my every move. The pancakes had lost their appeal, the box thrown out with the garbage, but the memory lingered, a dark cloud over my mornings. And sometimes, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I thought I could still hear a faint whisper on the edge of consciousness, pleading for help, forever trapped in a world I couldn't reach. That locket. I could still feel its cold touch, its haunting image burned into my mind. I had buried it, but I knew deep down that some things could never truly be laid to rest.